Hello, guys. Hello, and welcome back to Reading with Mo. Welcome if this is your first time watching one of my videos. Today we are going to be talking about the last books that I finished in the year of 2022. All the books I finished in December 2022. So at the beginning of that month, I had set this kind of just personal challenge to myself to try and read and finish 30 books in 30 days to try and help get some stuff off my shelves. I had been sitting there for a while. And I really probably shouldn't have attempted this challenge on literally the busiest month of the year for me work-wise. And I kind of shot myself in the foot a little bit in that I chose 3 of the books were like really chunky books. Like each of them was probably like 2 or 3 books themselves. So I overall was able to complete about 15-ish books. I say 15-ish because like one of them I have 2 copies on my shelf, so I'm counting that as 2. And I had a few DNFs as well. But it was my own personal reading challenge, so I can make up whatever rules I want to do. So let's just go straight into the books. I will be talking to you guys about them in the order that I read them. First one we have is published by Persephone Classics. I currently have about 3 of them on my shelves. I plan to continue collecting more, but only as I read them. This one is Cheerful Weather for the Wedding by Julius Strachey. I ended up giving this one a 3-star rating. I thought it was just okay. It's a very short novella, just over 100 pages. It takes place over the course of just one day. There is our main character. She's getting married. The family is getting ready for the wedding. She is deciding whether she wants to marry this person that she's engaged to, or like I guess her ex-person that she used to be with, her ex-lover comes to the wedding, and she's deciding if she wants to be with him or not. Like the whole time she's basically just drinking out of this rum bottle. I feel like I would have enjoyed it more had we gotten a little bit more of her like thinking or process, but I feel like we're kind of more so just observing all of the characters as they're going through this day, and as the wedding is approaching, it just kind of felt like time dragged on a bit. It went really slow. I know also like during the time that this was set, this was an English March day, and this was published in 1932. Weddings kind of happened a little bit differently then and for the region, but overall, I just thought it was okay, not very memorable, but I'm still going to continue picking up more Persephone Classics. The next book, unfortunately, was a DNF, and that was The Furrows by Namwali Serpell. I got the audiobook for this from my library. I had checked it out, and I think I got about a quarter of the way into it. I do own another book by this author called The Old Drift, and it's on my shelves, so I'm definitely going to give that one a chance to see if possibly it was just like this book that I didn't really enjoy as much. The book started off really promising, like it started off very interesting. We're following Cassandra. She's about 12 years old when her and her brother are like playing by the ocean or whatever. He's 7. Unfortunately, he ends up drowning, and this obviously plays a lot into just her own mental health and sense of being for the rest of her life. This accident really just destroys their family. I think the part where it lost me was where I couldn't tell like what was true and what wasn't. So we kind of keep getting these scenes of Cassandra losing her brother in a whole bunch of different ways. Looking at the reviews, it seems like the second part of the book completely changes, and we are following a new character. I guess like she somehow mistakes this guy's identity for her brother that had passed away, and I don't know, it just all sounded it just lost me there, and I just felt like already people were having issues with the second part of the book, and already I'm having issues with the first part, so I was just not going to continue on with it. So yeah, I mean, I feel like some people enjoy it. It could be for some people, it just was not for me. Next up, we have one of the chunky books I was talking about, and that is Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb, the first book in the final trilogy of the Realm of the Elderling series by Robin Hobb. This one is book 1, and I might as well just go ahead and talk about both of the ones that I read together because I really can't say much about either of them. So we have Fool's Assassin and Fool's Quest. I gave each of these a 4-star rating. I actually just finished the 3rd one, but that is going to be in part of my January wrap-up, and then you guys will not really be seeing this series or author on my wrap-ups or TBRs anymore because I will have finally finished, well, I did finally finish the 16-book series. Like I said, I really can't give away anything at this point of what's happened because we're now so in the thick of it, so deep into these books. As you can imagine, it was really cool being able to see some characters that we haven't seen since previous books in these series, but yeah, overall I gave both of these a 4-star rating. And like I said, these were so chunky. I think each of these, one was 600 pages, one was about 700 pages. I wasn't even planning on reading both of them in December. I just, you know, had the urge to once I finished the first one to continue on. So yeah, I am finishing this series up a little bit earlier than I expected to. Next we have another short book, and that is Follow Me to Ground. I think I actually have talked about some of these books. I attempted to do vlogs for the month of December as well, as if I needed to take on any more things and obligations. So I only ended up vlogging the first 2 weeks of the month. And so some of these books I have talked about a little bit in those vlogs if you have watched them, but I did not vlog the second 2 weeks of the month because I just like gave up basically. So we have Follow Me to Ground, which was a short book. I was trying to choose shorter books so I could try and make my goal of getting to 30 books. This book was definitely weird and different, but I liked it and I gave it a 4-star rating. We're following Ada, our main character, and her father, and they have this ability to be able to cure sick people. They live on the edge of their village and people are able to come to them to be healed, but they are very much separate from the people and they keep to themselves. But Ada kind of has this relationship that develops with one of the people who they call cures, who come and receive a healing from them that sets her off on a different path of maybe something different than what her father expects her to do, which is like take over this whole practice of healing the people after he's gone. It was definitely really beautifully written. It had a lot of really surreal scenes that we get to read about. It wasn't perfect, so I couldn't tell you exactly why I didn't get 5 stars. It wasn't just like missing something that made it like one of my favorite books of all time, which I very much reserve my 5-star ratings for, but I really did enjoy it and I would recommend it to you guys. Next up we have a audiobook that I listened to, and it's called The House Party by Rita Cameron. I gave this book a 3. I would say this would be like a high 3-star, almost 4-star rating now that I think of it. This was a new release audiobook that I was able to check out through my library. We're following this small suburban town and how the power of this one house party is able to divide them. So there's these kids, they end up having a house party, they trash the house. I guess it's a couple that's going to be moving into the town, like completely trash. Like the house has probably like 500,000 plus in damages, like extremely trashed. So it's dividing the town on whether these kids need to be held accountable or not, because they're looked at as good kids and they don't want to hurt their futures, but at the same time, like this isn't just like a little thing. This is a big mistake. The community is very tight-knit in wanting to protect this group of kids and their kids themselves. This whole situation is putting, I forget her name, how to pronounce the main character's name, Maja or Maha. One of the main characters, the one who's, her and her husband are moving into this house that they've just bought and had built. It's very much playing an effect on their relationship themselves and bringing some things to light. I would describe this book as kind of like a domestic, not exactly like a mystery thriller, but like a drama type of book. In that kind of category is what I would put it in. And I thought it was good. It was entertaining, good enough for the read, but like not super memorable. Like I feel like I'm probably gonna forget about this book eventually in the future, but I did enjoy my time as I was reading and listening and like seeing how all of these effects were gonna play out. And then we have another new release called Witnesses for the Dead by Gary Phillips, who is the editor, and Gar Anthony Haywood. I ended up giving this anthology a 3-star rating. There were some stories in here because they're all by different authors. There were some that I liked more than others, so that's why I felt like I would just give it a middle of the ground rating with a 3-star rating. All of the stories in this anthology kind of are connected by this thread that they all have in common, which is they involve a character witnessing something and then that character having to decide whether they're going to act on what they've witnessed or whether they're going to try and kind of like just not be involved in what they witnessed. I feel like some of them were a little bit over the top and a little bit not as believable, but you can tell how a lot of the stories were really inspired by true events and things that have happened in America, which is where these stories are set. All in all, not one of my favorite short story anthologies, but I feel like if you are someone who does like short story anthologies, that this is something that you would enjoy. Then I was able to get to a classic last month, and that was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. This is the 200th anniversary edition, illustrated by David Plunkett, that is published by Wrapup. And I really love these editions. This is my first time. I have a few on my shelves, but this is the first one I've actually read from. So throughout the text, there's illustrations by David, who is the illustrator for this, and they definitely have the vibe and fit the mood of the story itself. I feel like I have never read Frankenstein before. Obviously, I've heard of him and the story, but I had heard is kind of very much changed the version of Frankenstein we have now in like our pop culture, as opposed to what was actually originally written by the author. And so I really enjoyed it. With classics, it kind of is hard to get into at first, but then once you kind of get used to the language, it's a little bit easier to follow along. With Frankenstein, I didn't realize Frankenstein was actually the name of the scientist who creates this being, and I don't think he actually has a name, who he creates. But I liked the idea of it was very much a story and a story and a story. And then we kind of zoom back out again at the end. I can definitely see how this definitely would fit in the suspense horror genre, in that like Frankenstein has created this being that then wants to take revenge on him, or like he doesn't really take responsibility for this being that he created. And so yeah, I feel like Frankenstein as a character could be a little bit frustrating, but definitely like believable in his actions for sure. But yeah, frustrating in that he just really doesn't really take responsibility or try to help the situation that he's kind of created. All in all, I did enjoy this book, and I'm glad that I finally got to it. And I gave this book a 4-star rating. I don't remember if I mentioned that before or not. So the next book, which is the last one that I have a physical copy to show you guys of, is the last like chunky book that I got to last month. And what's funny is when I was listening to the audiobook off and on for Frankenstein, it actually had the same narrator as this other one that I had finished, which is Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. So I'm counting this book twice because I actually have as 2 books read off my shelves, because I do have 2 copies of it. This one I've had for a while now. I've had it for a minute on my shelves. This one I picked up recently when I was on vacation, and I wanted something like small. I wanted to read this book and I wanted something smaller to carry on in my traveling stuff. So I have 2 copies of this book now. Definitely with the show being finished, that is wrapped up for this season, is what really motivated me to finally pick this up off my shelves. And while I'm really glad that I read it, I gave it a 4-star rating. I kind of wish I had waited. One, because now I have a lot of spoilers for the show, because the book does continue on past what the show is at right now. But also there is going to be a part 2. And knowing how fast that George is writing, I don't expect part 2 to be out anytime soon. So this is another sequel I'm going to have to be anticipating for a long time. And so yeah, this book I gave a high 4-star rating, like almost 5 stars, but not quite there for me, just because of the more dry nature of the book, because it's technically more of like a history of the Targaryens. So while it is definitely very interesting, it does read in between a novel and a textbook, but I found it very entertaining still. I liked being able to read past. I did like reading and being able to read past and see what's going to go on in the next few seasons of the show. And also, like, the show only takes place like a little sliver of this book. Honestly, there's stuff that happens even before or prior to the show that I think would be really cool if they eventually adapted into another prequel series. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. It's a history of the Targaryens about 300 years, I believe it was, before the events in the Song of Fire and Ice series. So next up we have The Night Ship by Just Kid. This was another recent release I was able to check out as an audiobook through my library. I ended up giving it about 3-star rating. This one I kind of felt like I should have probably DNF'd. There was a couple of moments where I had thought about doing it while I was reading the book, not because it was necessarily bad. I just felt like it wasn't really a standout book to me. I didn't feel like I was going to give it much a higher rating than a 3. But I decided to stick with it, see where the story went, see how it finished, and I feel like I should probably just DNF, because this is a historical fiction novel based off a true story. I feel like I'm learning about my reading is that I'm not the hugest fan of dual timelines that really over coincidentally mirror each other, if that makes sense, because I feel like I have read a couple of books like this recently, and every time I just feel like they're okay. I never really feel like often they're done very well. The book that I'm thinking about that was kind of similar to this and kind of like book structure is The Attic Child by Lola J that I read a few months ago. In this book, we're following the characters in these timelines are both taking place in Western Australia. There's a girl who is shipwrecked in an island, and then 300 years later there's a boy who is finding a home with his grandfather on the same island in 1629. So they are both orphaned and going into this whole new like situation of living, having to get used to their circumstances changing. I honestly don't really remember a lot about this book. I feel like this book definitely does have an audience though. I feel like it has high ratings. There's a lot of people that gave it 5 stars. I just feel like as a genre and as a plot device, it's just not something that I'm interested in personally. But and Just Kid also released Things in Jars a few years ago, and a lot of people enjoyed that one as well. And so yeah, this one I feel like a book I'm in the minority of. I feel like the majority of people gave this book 4 or 5 star rating. I actually did have one more book that I actually do have a physical copy of. I forgot because I just purchased it recently, and this was my only 5-star read for the month of December, and that was Receded by Toni Morrison. This is her short story, her only short story that she released, and it was very much a thought experiment on writing a story where we're following 2 girls who meet each other because they're both staying in this, I believe it was like a foster home or like a kids shelter, and briefly for a few months that they stayed together. We don't know which, one's black, one's white, we don't know who's who. Throughout the book you're going to be trying to figure it out, but even you'll think you have it figured out and then stuff will change. Toni Morrison definitely plays on what we would expect things to be and tries to turn it on its head a bit, so I thought that that was really cool. The story itself is pretty short. I picked this up at the Barnes & Noble hardback sale that they were having. The first half of this is actually just an introduction by Zadie Smith. The short story itself is even shorter than the introduction. I enjoyed it, and I feel like this is a short story I will definitely pick up again in the future, so I wanted to own a copy for my shelves. So the next book I'm going to talk to you guys about is a book that I checked out as well as a new release audiobook from my library, and it's called Hester by Lori Ligo Albanese. This book, we're following Isabel, who is a young seamstress in the 1800s, and she moves from Scotland with her husband Edward to the New World to start a new life. They arrive in Salem. They're only there for a few days before he leaves off on an adventure, and he leaves her basically alone and penniless to fend for herself in this new town. He's pretty much a jerk from the beginning in their relationship. So she ends up meeting this young Nathaniel Hawthorne and goes on to be his inspiration for what we now know as the Scarlet Letter. Throughout reading her story, we'll also get this interwoven perspective of another story that takes place in, I don't even remember the timeline now. I think it was like further back, like during the Salem witch trials. And I just felt like the book was really good, but at the end, it kind of just was trying to fit a little bit too much in for me. I felt like the other perspective was very confusing to me because I was trying to figure out in the beginning like exactly who this other person was, how they were related to the story, and it kind of really distracted me from Isabel's story. And there's other things that are brought in as well, like stuff to do with like the Underground Railroad and just other issues that I feel like the book was trying to tackle a little bit too much and could have used with a little bit of paring back in that area. So like I said, a high 3-star rating. It was a good book. I feel like it definitely has an audience for it out there, and if it sounds interesting to you, I definitely would say to pick it up. Next, we have The Best American Food Writing of 2022. This is edited by Sola L. Whaley and Sylvia Killingsworth. This book almost got a 5-star rating for me. It was a very, very high 4-star. I just felt like I couldn't give it a full 5-star because there were a couple of essays in here that I didn't enjoy as much, that were not bad, but just not essays I would give a 5-star rating to. But as far as like any sort of short story anthology, I feel like this is probably the best one that I've read so far. And what I really love about this book is it got me into food writing. Now I'm obsessed. I want to read so much food writing. I want to read stuff that's fiction and nonfiction. I just feel like it's something that I'm going to really enjoy. And this is the edition that was released for 2022, but they've been publishing these anthologies since 2018. So I'm definitely going to be picking up the backlist of these and reading my way through them, not in any rush, just as I get around to it and as I'm in the mood for it. There were altogether a collection of their selected best 20 articles published in 2021. And I really just love food writing. I love it so much. So yes, for that, I mean, I probably should just give this book 5 stars for introducing me and making me realize how much I do love food writing. And our very last book that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today is called A Mother Would Know by Amber Garza. I listened to this one on audiobook. This is a book that falls into the mystery thriller category. I ended up giving this book a 3-star rating, which is kind of average. I feel like a lot for me for like mystery thriller books. in general. One thing I thought that was really cool about this book, as I was listening to it, in the beginning, the characters talking about where they live, and they were talking about Sacramento, and I was like, wait, did I just hear that right? So I had to like rewind it, play it again, and yeah, this book takes place in Sacramento, which is pretty cool because I've been in the past looking for books that were set in Sacramento because that's where I'm from, where I live, and I just really didn't find any. And I guess this author, Amber Garza, she lives in Folsom, and so yeah, a lot of these places where this book takes place are places near me or places that I have been, which I thought was pretty cool. So yeah, the overall rating for this book, I would say also is like in the high 3s for me. We're following our main character, Valerie. She's getting older, she's forgetting a lot of things and suspecting that she may have dementia. So she has 2 kids. Her son, she doesn't really have much of a relationship with, but he moves back in with her so that, you know, he can be there to help her as she is going through this change of life. She hopes that this will kind of also help jumpstart repairing their relationship, which has never really been the best. But yeah, it kind of goes against her expectations. That doesn't end up happening. The neighbors aren't too happy about him moving back. Apparently there's something that happened when he was a kid growing up in this neighborhood, and they blame him for it. And as soon as he comes back, within a couple weeks, there is another woman in their neighborhood who ends up turning up murdered. Valerie is questioning a lot of how she thinks and feels and remembers things because she has been having memory loss, and she's trying to figure out, you know, did her son have something to do with this? Does she need to protect him? What's going on? I thought that was a really interesting premise, and I feel like the author handled it really well. The end will have you kind of thinking like, you know, one a certain way and then maybe something else happens. I kind of guessed the ending of what it might be. I don't know, I want to say like 2/3 of the way into the book. I figured out what was going to happen in the end, but I thought it was overall very interesting and well done, and I would be open to reading other books by Amber in the future. So that is it for my final wrap up for 2022. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing my thoughts on the final books that I was able to read last year. It definitely was an interesting reading year. I can't wait to look back on all of the year as a whole, which will definitely be coming out as a video for you guys soon too, like a kind of 2022 wrap up, so we can then move on freshly with the things that are going to be happening in 2023. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.